Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome to my channel. My name is June and I'll be discussing the very controversial issue of Acheron versus Firefly. And with Firefly coming out really soon, in a couple of days, everyone's really hyped, everyone wants to get her. So I'll be giving my personal opinions on what I think is better, Acheron or Firefly. So let me get into reasons why Firefly might be better than Acheron. So the one thing I want to start off with is Firefly's weakness implant, which basically makes all the enemies weak to fire, right? And that's very similar to Acheron, where with their ult being you just hit anything. You're colorless breaker. You can hit any weakness, right? But the difference between the two is that Firefly's weakness implant also applies to her skill, her enhanced skill, basic, and her ultimate, right? That's the difference. Compared to Acheron, which only applies the weakness break, her colorless break on her ult. What that means is Firefly has weakness on basically all of her attacks compared to Acheron, who only has her ult. So Firefly is a better breaker in that sense, right? And that's one thing I think Firefly is better than Acheron at. The next, this is for like low spenders, some whales, I guess, who want to consider her E2 and which E2 is better, because a lot of people talk about Acheron's E2 being absolutely insane. So Acheron's E2, what it does is it gives another stack for her ultimate and allows different team comps instead of the 2 Nihility, because you get to drop one. So it could be Pela Ranmei, Pela Bronya, Pela Sparkle, whoever you want to use with Acheron, right? While E2 Firefly, which is probably the best E2 in the game, very similar to E2 Dill, where you get another turn, but allows you to get another turn every time she weakness breaks the enemy, right? Which is very different from Dan Heng's E2, which basically gives you another turn after every ultimate. So if you can consistently break every time Firefly goes, you'll be going 2 times per turn, which is absolutely insane. Her E2 is absolutely insane. On top of that, she has a weakness implant, which means her attacks will always break. So that E2 is just absolutely insane. You can probably go so many times in one cycle because of that, right? So that's why I think her E2 is actually a little bit better than Acheron's, and her E2 is just absolutely broken. So if you guys are pulling for Firefly, you should get her E2. Another thing I want to talk about is her build. How free to play is Firefly, right? She scales off attack and break effect, and Acheron scales off crit. And if we all play the game, you know, we all do our crit rolls, getting attack and break effect is way easier than crit, right? Building attack and break effect is way more accessible and way easier than building crit stats. So I think in that sense, Firefly is easier to build on Acheron and kind of makes her more free to play friendly in the sense that she's easier to build. Another thing I want to talk about is her Lycone options. She's a great one on the Herda shop, right? You can easily get that S5 and it's a really good Lycone on her. Obviously it's not as good as Signature, but you know, free to play Lycone option will never be as good as Signature, and that's okay. But that option is really good on her, gives her attack and weakness break that she wants. It's a really good Lycone on Firefly. Compared to Acheron, where, you know, Good Night Sleep well, yeah, it works. The other 4-star like Gacha Lycone that came out for her, it works, but the easy access of Firefly's free to play Lycone I think is easier, makes her easier to build than Acheron, right? And another thing I want to mention is the direction that Hoyoverse is bringing the game. Break meta right now is like everywhere. Like everyone wants to build break. Break is on everything. MOC, Pure Fiction, the new game mode, Apocalyptic Shadow, however you pronounce it, is also going to be break focused. So everything just break. So Firefly right now is fitting around the meta perfectly, which is a really good thing for her. And as we could probably tell, break effect will probably, or break meta will probably be very prevalent in the future. So she's really a good investment to get right now because break is always going to be prevalent, especially with Ranmei, Boot Hill, and Firefly being the main leaders of break effect, right? So in that sense, she's going to be very useful in the future, very future proof, even with weakness implants and stuff like that. So why Firefly might be worse? So Firefly needs Ranmei, another 5-star character, right? And without Ranmei, Firefly sees a massive damage drop off, like a lot. And obviously she still works with other supports, but her not having Ranmei is very huge, right? And that's one thing that is kind of bad against Firefly, especially because Ranmei is running in the same banner as Firefly. So if you're looking to get E0S1 or E2S1, you might not be able to get Ranmei, right? And the damage drop off of not getting Ranmei is actually insanely huge, right? It could be even more huge than not getting her signature. Like you'd rather get Ranmei than have Firefly signature because of the damage increase and drop off between the two, right? Compared to Acheron, where you can just basically use any Nihility character that applies debuffs, right? Like Pela, easy to get. Everyone has her probably. If you start in the beginning of the game, you get her for free. You could use Good Knifin, Sampo, literally anyone. Black Swan, just anyone can work with Acheron because all you need is debuffs. Obviously, Pele Good Knifin with her defense downs, Black Swan is the best, but realistically, you can use any Nihility character with her and she'll do just fine. So her supporting cast is a lot easier to use because Firefly really needs Ron main that team, which could be in a sense why Firefly might be worse, but not necessarily, but it could be a con of getting Firefly and why Acheron might be better. The other one I'll talk about is the quality of life of having Acheron. Acheron just gives that technique to kill the mobs in the overworld, which makes the game a lot easier. It doesn't make the meta or anything like that, like change or anything like that, but if you have Acheron, you would know what I mean by she makes the game so much easier, and having like a technique that just one-shots mobs just saves so much time. And for me personally, that's important. So I think that's a con for Firefly, right? Not having the ability to one-shot these mobs for quality of life. I think that's really important in a game like Honkai Star Rail. Another thing I'll talk about is Acheron's ult. Yes, Firefly has a weakness implant on her skill and her basic, enhanced basic, whatever. But Acheron can hit all 5 enemies at one time, which Firefly cannot. A Firefly can have a max hit of 3, but Acheron can hit a maximum of 5. That's one thing that I think is important. For example, for Perfection, that's just way more convenient. And obviously, if you're able to pick off all the enemies on the side and have only 3 enemies at one time, then this wouldn't be an issue, right? But in certain situations where there's 5 enemies at one time, you can't just one-shot with Firefly. Having the ability to just hit all 5 mobs at one time is actually really useful, right? So I think that's one of the cons of Firefly. She's not as AoE prevalent as much as Acheron, right? So basically, in conclusion, you know, I can't 100% confirm who's better. You know, I don't have the character yet. I don't have beta. Without live testing, I can't confirm which one's better. But I think overall, Firefly could be better than Acheron. She has a lot of pros, making her insanely good. You know, her break efficiency, you know, her fire implant weakness, and the current meta that Hoyoverse is pushing to, which is break meta. She's perfect, fits perfectly in that setting, right? So I think overall, she'll be a really good character. And yeah, that's what I think. And that's why I think Firefly could be better than Acheron. If you guys like this content, go drop a like, you know, subscribe, and let me know what you think about my takes. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.